Welcome to moving files from LFS to Git. In this lecture, we're going to be learning to do just that, which is learning the pros and cons of using LFS for everything and figuring out how we can move some of the files that we've put in LFS previously back into just raw Git. So we are going to see what exactly is telling LFS what to store and where, which is the .git attributes file, and we're going to find out how to modify it and how to refresh Git's view so that files can be moved from LFS to Git. So let's dive right in. So far, we've been using Git LFS in a rather indiscriminate way. We've said that all large assets basically need to go in there, and because some U assets will be large, we need to put all U assets in there. Now, what I want to say in this lecture is that we need to be a bit more nuanced than that, because some U assets, especially blueprints, we want to change very frequently. And in fact, Git's quite good at diffing anything, whether it's text or binary. It's just not very good when the repo gets too large. So we want to steer away from having large files in there, but we also want to avoid LFS bloat, which happens when you frequently change files that are in LFS. The reason this happens is because there is no diffing going on when a file is in LFS. You only get that kind of diffing and incremental backup behavior when the file is directly in normal Git. So what we want to do in this lecture is move some of our stuff over to from Git LFS to normal Git. And to do that, firstly, we're going to create a new folder. We're going to create a new folder called static in our contents directory. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And in here, we're going to put all our static content. And we're going to move from versioning in LFS everything that is a U asset to everything that's in the static subfolder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move each of these folders, the weapons folder first, then the player, NPC, levels, and geometry all into static. Let me move those. It can take a little bit of a while because there's quite a few assets here that we're moving. And then what we're going to do is once this move has taken place, we're going to go ahead and just commit that before we make any changes to LFS, because I want to make those changes to LFS separately so that you can see exactly what's going on. Okay, so these folders haven't been removed. That's because basically they're empty, but one of them did hang around. That was the first person example map. That often happens. You're going to have to just move that a second time. I don't know why that happens. I think it's because it's the map that's currently open, but we have to have some map open, so that's a little bit confusing. Okay, now we've got nothing in any of these folders. We can go ahead, select them all, right-click and delete. And we'll just be left with stuff in static. Oh no, we've got redirectors, so we need to go ahead, right-click on content, fix up redirectors in folder. And then once that's done, then finally we can get geometry, levels, NPC, and player, and go ahead and delete them. Now with that done, one more step, we need to delete it in the file system. So let's go over to content, select geometry, levels, NPC, player, and weapons, and just go ahead and delete those folders. They will be empty anyway. So now we just have static. Everything's gone into static. We will move some things out eventually, but let's do just one thing for now. In the next lecture, we'll do a proper refactor and talk about the differences and what kind of files we want in LFS and which ones we don't. But for now, we just want to figure out the mechanics of moving things from LFS to Git. So what I want to move out is the player behavior. So I'm just going to create a new folder, call it player, and just move the behavior entire subfolder there. Now we've got an empty behavior, so I'm going to just delete that. Oh no, we have redirectors. Let's fix up those redirectors. Get rid of that behavior subfolder. And make sure we get rid of it also in our static folder in Explorer. So I'll go into player, behavior, check it's empty. Yes, it is. I'll get rid of that. So now we've not got it on disk either. And I'm just going to close Unreal to make sure all our changes have been saved. And go over into source tree and just commit these uncommitted changes. So we've got a bunch of unstaged changes, which was this move. So I'm just going to go and stage all. This could take a little while because there's quite a few files. And once we've staged all, we're going to go and commit this with a commit message saying something like moved all files into static subfolder, something along those lines. And from there, we will be able to go ahead and change the settings for Git LFS. As you can see, this really can be quite a lengthy process, so I'm just going to skip ahead to let it finish. Okay, so I let it finish and then I went and hit the commit icon. So I'm just going to give this a commit name. Moved all assets into static subfolder. So I'm going to go ahead, commit that. Now, one thing I want to notice about these changes, if we go and have a look at them by selecting the commit in our history and just going to the lower pane and selecting any of these files, you'll notice that the thing that gets changed is a text file that represents the file. It's not the file itself, and that's what LFS is doing. It's replacing the file with a pointer to the file. Now, what we want to do is, for some of these assets, the ones that aren't in static, to go ahead and remove that. Now, let me show you how this works. What's the general outline process? First of all, to remove things from LFS, we need to edit the tracked files. Next up, we need to refresh the cache of what Git is seeing as files and what it's seeing as pointers, and basically get LFS and Git to sync up. And to do this, we do these following two weird commands. Now, the full stop isn't an error. The full stop actually is part of the command. The rm cached essentially pretends to Git that we're deleting the file, and the add adds it back in. So that's just a way of getting Git to renew its view of that file. Now, I'm going to let you do that in just a second. But first, let me show you how we can edit what is being tracked by LFS. Let's go over to the repository menu to Git LFS and track and untrack files. Now in here, you'll notice we've got these following two types. And if we tried to do an add, it wouldn't be very effective because it assumes that you're doing it based on file type. And that's okay for most use cases, but in our case where we want to do a whole subfolder, Git LFS's integration into source tree isn't enough. So we need to understand where Git LFS is getting this from. And it's actually quite simple. If we go into Explorer and go to the root of our directory, you'll notice there are these two files with no name. If we actually went and hit properties on them, they aren't being very useful to us, but the reason for this is that they're actually dot files. They have a dot in front of them, and so the name is being hidden. So what we want to do is go ahead and open any text editor of your choice. So even something like as simple as Notepad or WordPad will do just fine. I'm actually going to go with Notepad to be super simple. And then using Notepad, we can go ahead and open, then go into the folder, the testing grounds folder, and open up a file called .git attributes, all one word like that. Now you won't see it in this folder because it's hidden, but if you go and hit open, just wait a little second, then the following file appears. And as you can see, we have, as well as a bunch of garbage at the end of the line, not garbage actually, it's quite important, but along with this stuff at the end of the line, you've got that pattern that we saw in source tree. Now what we're going to do is manually edit this. So there's one pattern per line essentially, and I just want that one pattern. And it uses exactly the same syntax as a git ignore. So if you've seen the more advanced git ignore syntax, what you can do is just replace this first bit with that. And in our case, we want a content, or content actually. Go back to the folder, just check content, yep. And then we want /static, so that's the content subfolder called static, and then / and ***. So what that /** says is take every sub-element, subfolder and sub-subfolders of static and apply the filter, the LFS filters to that. So what that's basically saying is that now Git attributes, Git LFS is applying to the subfolder static and everything underneath it. So we can close that text file now and can go back into source tree and just check that that's the case. Go to Git LFS, track and untrack files, and you can see that it's added in that content static ***. Okay, great. Now, what you need to do now is remove that cache. So I'm going to leave that as a challenge for you guys to retrack your files. Move everything into your static folder as I did. Leave one blueprint out as I did. And edit tracking just like me. And then that's the way you do it. You can do a Git LFS track as well to add things in. Unfortunately, you have to use a slightly different syntax to this. So if you went to your terminal, which is at the top right in source tree, you would do a git track, and then, git LFS track, and then you'd have to put it in single quotes that you want content, static, and star star, like so. Because if you do what's on the slide, then what it will try to do is simply track that's one folder and nothing else. So do it like this with git LFS track content static star star in these single quotes. And then next up, you do the git rm -- cache -r dot, and you do git add. And you should be able to see that then it has changed a lot of the files, or a few of the files in your git commit, and you should see which ones they are, and make a commit and see whether now what's in your diff is going to be these pointer files or the actual files themselves. So pause the video and have a go. Okay, welcome back. So I'm going to go ahead and do this procedure. Obviously, I've already edited my attributes file directly. I suggest you can try and do the editing directly, or you can try the LFS track. Now, git rm -- cached, this means we're not doing it for real, we're just doing it on Git's impression of the files, on its index, it's called. R means it's recursive, so it does it on everything, and dot means it does it on this directory. So we do that. Now, you might be alarmed if you went to source tree and refreshed, because it would look like it's deleted all your files, but in actual fact, as you can see in the unstaged files, they're all still there, they're just in an untracked state. So next up, we do a git add to make sure they're all tracked again by Git. This can take a little bit of a while depending on the speed of your hard drive, depending on many factors, but I will just fast forward through this. Okay, now that's completed, we can go back into source tree and refresh and just check it out. And as you can see, the only thing that's changed is that content behavior first person character uasset. And if you go and open our before, then this should open up a text file. It's using my Atom text editor, and I've got to let it load because it's going to take a little bit of a time. But when it loads up, you will see that this is just the pointer file. So what we've changed it from is that pointer file. But if I open after, and again, I've got to let it load, this time it's going to be a binary file. So it's going to take another little while to load. But once it does load, you'll quite clearly see that indeed the contents of this file really is the contents of the blueprint and not just a pointer to it. So I hope that's convinced you. And I'm going to go ahead and commit this and say updated git attributes to track only static subfolders. So I'm going to go ahead and commit that. Shouldn't take too long. And what we've now got is that everything inside the static folder is still being used with LFS. As we can see, nothing has changed there, so the pointers are still all intact. However, that new behavior first person character uasset it's not new at all. It's just been converted from a pointer into the real thing. So we've moved from LFS into Git. Congratulations, pat yourselves on the back. That's quite tough to get your head around pointers in Git. It's kind of all a bit messed up and weird. It's like C++ on a whole new level. But congratulations, you've now got it in the bag, and we'll see in the next lecture how to sort out our different files into LFS and non-LFS. See you there.